Welcome to the Revenue Marketing Report powered by CaliberMind. I'm your host, Kamala Thompson, and today I am joined by Eric Westerkamp. Eric, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Eric Westerkamp. I'm the CEO here at CaliberMind.
Welcome back, Eric. Thanks for hanging in there. Today we're going to talk about machine learning and how it can help us with ideal customer profile analysis. What are you seeing in the market?
The concept of an ideal customer, it's been around for a long time, right? And a lot of organizations have been using very standard mechanisms to kind of try to figure out who they are. Often they're pretty simple, industry, size of company, right? Maybe some technographic information or data, but pretty simple things. And it's a way for the organization to figure out, like, okay, who do I focus on? Of who's most likely to buy my product, right, or service or whatever it is. And then also, to be honest, like, how do I divide that up amongst sales teams and marketing and all of that? Like, who do I go after, right? So we've seen that as a pretty standard mechanism in the industry. I think what we're finding is that more advanced marketing organizations are really trying to give a lot more nuance to that ICP, right? Because there's a lot of stats out there that say all the companies you go after may be this big, but only X% are actually in market right now,
Yeah, I
right?
think it's something like 3%. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I read 5%, but yeah, right in that number, right? They may be in market right now. And so you've got a slice that you really want to go after, and then you've got a slice that you need to be sort of like making aware of you and bring it in. And then at some point in time, you want to try to move some of these down here, right? But these are
Mhm.
ones that have, more intent, maybe projects are moving. How do you use ICP, and the term we use internally called ACP? So ideal customers and acceptable customers, right? Here's the
Mhm.
ones that you really want these. And then here's ones that could be good customers, but from an expense perspective, I'm willing to spend almost anything to get these customers. These are good customers, but they may not tend to have the same LTV. They may come in at middle or lower price points. You want them, but you have to make sure that you're applying the right amount of resources to acquire them, right? They can't be the same as your ICP. So how do you identify the two different buckets? And then how do you broaden out the features so that when you're looking at a customer base, you can differentiate between the two using things that are maybe a little bit more nuanced, like I said, than just the size of the company and the industry.
Yeah. And I'm thinking back to some of the really early stage startups that I worked for early in my career. What I saw a lot, and I still see this today, to be completely honest, is we had some executive founders who were very technical. They built the product for a reason. They thought they know exactly who and why they would, who would want to buy and why.
Yeah.
And then we actually dug into it, and that wasn't quite right. Or
Yeah.
we hear from the sales leader, and they have this great big deal, and that's the profile they want to chase from then on out, not
Mhm.
realizing how expensive it was to keep up with that kind of customer early on in their journey. So you're not only talking about moving away from intuition-based ICP analysis, you're talking really advanced already, and we really haven't even dug into the machine learning aspect
Yeah. Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
So, would love to talk about, we have some products that are well suited to a profile that's fairly easy to identify, but we've got some products where, like, I'm thinking analytics, I'm thinking attribution, where it's not so much about the size of the company or the makeup necessarily of the company. It's more about the mentality and adoption of
Yeah.
data-driven decision making.
Yeah.
How does machine learning help with that kind of nuanced profiling?
Here at CaliberMind, we're playing around with leveraging machine learning to help us basically essentially pick our ICP, our ACP, right? Our head of customer success, Nick Zongray, actually, we tasked him with this, right? And we said, hey, go play around. You've got access to all of this data in CaliberMind, right? You have access to some machine learning frameworks that we've embedded on top of it from Google. We said, why don't you go experiment with how we would create a new ICP score? And it was actually very interesting. What he came up with was a new model, and the model kind of ran on top of all of our data, and it recreated our ICP. And the neat thing about using some of the machine learning algorithms that we did was that it doesn't have to just be like industry and size and some technographics, right? We embedded those features in it, but we also embedded some other interesting information, like how many data analysts are at the company. Like, so there's this other set of features. And so you can kind of broaden out your feature set, right? And then you can look back at, if you have access to it, successful data, right? So the best ICP score doesn't just take your intuition, but it actually looks at, like, of the past, 3 or 4 years, what's worked, what companies have been engaged with you. So you have access to engagement scores or anything like that. That's great because you can look at, here's companies that got engaged and that maybe worked, that maybe didn't meet the profiles over here for technographics and firmographics and some of those things. And you can maybe even look deeper at, what were the individuals? What were the roles? What were the people? And you can embed all of those different features, and you can start to run your ICP model and start to tune it and start to come up with a new mechanism that allows you to score accounts. The great thing about something like this, when you automate it like this, is that your ICP may change, right? Over time, your ICP drifts, your product gets more mature, you start going up market, right? That changes. If you're A lot of companies I've seen, they sort of create their ICP methodology, they embed it in Salesforce. It's just some simple math, and boom, everything's scored that way, and it drives everything. You see that all the time, right?
Yeah, and I'm cringing because if you're not looking at your ICP every 6 to 18 months at the most in a younger company,
Yeah,
you're not doing it often enough.
exactly. And so by using a model you can rerun it every month if you want. Probably too often. Every quarter, you may start to see something, right? Every 6 months, definitely you want to rerun it. And then you rescore accounts and it tells you what your ICP is. And then, of course, there's still a human element. Okay, once you get the data, let's go look at it. So for instance, we ran our ICP scores. It did a really good job. The machine, we embedded it, and then we ran it back by our sales team and our marketing team and said, let's go look at the data. And we said, you know what? It's doing a really good job, but here's some industries and things like that it's selecting that we just know aren't really for us, right? And so even though the model's pretty good, it selected some stuff that we probably don't want to target. So then you just go back in and you add a layer of filtering on top. Okay, let's take those out. Done, right? Let's also give the sales team a way of saying, well, I'm getting access to these customers. This is working, right? And so that'll feed back into the model later on. It allows the model to adjust, right, over time. And it allows you to operationalize sort of that testing and that work on that model. And then if you do it right, you can have the model create the scores and then push those scores into Salesforce, and it re-ranks all of your accounts on a quarterly, biannual basis, something like that.
And I like talking about this particular use case because ICP can help define so many things
Yeah.
throughout the go-to-market team, like your sales territories. So do you want to maybe dig into that just a little bit? I know marketing
Yeah.
doesn't usually design territories, but it impacts them.
It absolutely impacts them. I'll be honest, like it's the beginning of 2024. We're doing all of our territory planning right now for all of
Mhm.
our salespeople. And so we're using the ICP score. So what we're doing is, we'll say, okay, we have reps, we have assignments, we have regions. Okay, now based upon the ICPs, we'll go back in, and what's great about it is I can say by rep, how many accounts do you have that are ICP level A? How many accounts do you have that are ICP level B for your region, right? And we start to balance it that way. Now, an interesting nuance that we're working on right now is we said, okay, but we happen to know that certain regions over or underperform, right? For our technology in different companies, that'll be different regions and different things, or maybe different nuances. And we're looking at that and we said, okay, we happen to know that certain areas of the US tend to perform way better than other areas, even though there may be similar companies in those regions that match that ICP. So the question is, do you take that data and do you try to get it back into the model to re-rank the ICP? Or do you add a layer on top of your ICP that weights it, right? And that's more of a data science question, but it's also, how do you operationalize this? We decided to just kind of reweight the ICPs based upon the region. So if you're in this region, your ICP, the value of companies at ICP A in this region are probably more valuable than ICP A down here. And that's based on historic just trends that we've seen, right? Now, the reason we don't want to embed it in the model is some of those trends may be self-reinforcing.
Yep.
The reason those regions are performing is because you happen to have sales reps that are focused in there or on the ground. We happen to do more marketing to it or some of those things. So, we made the decision for our own to kind of layer it out so that we could maybe adjust it over time or change it and really keep an eye on it and keep the identification of companies that are strong. Because now you still have your ICP score, but there are companies in these regions that match that score. You do want to find out what it takes to get to them. Right.
Yep.
And so that's what we've done with ours. So we're kind of blending machine learning model to create that original score with some sort of like context that we put on top of it specific to our business. And then we use that, we push that into our system, we do our sales planning and our territory planning that way.
Yeah. And hopefully with a sophisticated model that can pick up on the signals that indicate data adoption and maturity in that way, you can start to pick out where maybe you aren't marketing enough, right? Or you don't have enough in-person interaction going on.
Well, and this starts getting into, the combination, I think, of, three really key terms that help marketers and sales teams know where to focus. I mean, if your ICP, that's kind of like, what accounts should I go after? You have intent, which basically says, okay, there's some signals out here coming from, intent vendors and stuff like that. Different industries have them. We happen to use things like Bombora and things like that. And then you have engagement, and engagement is how engaged are they with you and your brand?
Yeah.
Those three numbers really kind of govern tactics. Is it marketing that should be engaged in doing something, and what should they doing based upon where those three numbers are? Is it sales that should be engaged? A heavily engaged customer, right? That has that's interacting with you and your brand a lot. I mean, sales should be picking that up and working on it, right? But maybe a customer that is dead on for ICP and had dead on for intent, but isn't really engaging with you at all. That's marketing, man. That's marketing's job. Go get those engaged with us, right? And then when they get to a certain level of engagement, sales starts to pick it up, right? And then marketing has a job in that too. And that's really helping them stay engaged, bringing all the other buyers in that buying group into the process, after they start to get engaged, things like that.
Which is a great segue for our next topic, which is basically marketing's job. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Revenue Marketing Report. Please tell 2 friends, subscribe, download, whatever you can helps. And for those of you looking for more great content like this, check out CaliberMind.com.